Let's get started. This is Joe Ken for Dynamic Fitness and Strength, and in this month's Dynamic Discussions, we are going live from one of the meeting rooms at Torque/Rise, a new tremendous 120,000 square foot facility that just happens to be 4.2 miles from my house. So I got a brand new gym to train in. But we're here with Adam Barber. Adam and Jessica Barber are the owners of Torque, and we'll talk a little bit about the journey of how they got their performance facility placed in this. They were part of it from the very beginning, how they went through the Forsyth County and Winston-Salem districts to get things approved. But before I do that, we always got to thank Dynamic Fitness and Strength owners, Kurt and Tammy Tambernino, for allowing us to do this every month, and my production man, James Peters, who always gets us right and always puts up with all my bull crap when it comes to content delivery. So with that being said, first, before we get started, Adam, the first thing we want to say on behalf of Dynamic is thank you for trusting us in the process. We really appreciate it, and we're glad to have you on tonight.
Yep, absolutely, always.
So what we're going to do is we're going to go through a few questions and talk to Adam about this specific facility, and hopefully some of those answers help you out on some of the choices he made, some of the things he was involved with from the beginning. If you got any, you can send some to the chat. Then we've got two questions that were asked beforehand that we'll reach, and then we'll go from there. So my first question is, give us just a little bit in a nutshell how this goal and how this vision came about, and the people that you were involved with to get a project of this magnitude off the ground here in North Carolina.
Yep. So also I need to apologize in advance. There's a bunch of volleyball teams practicing, so it's not Joe and I getting too happy and excited over here. It's a bunch of girls over there practicing volleyball. But this started probably, so my wife and I opened Torque in July of 2014, and we, from the very beginning, started in the 1,825 square foot space, and that was not our initial spot we wanted to be, but it's what we could afford. So we started with $5,000, and I think we went to Rogue and bought one of their little CrossFit racks, like 2 bars, 250 pounds of bumpers, and Joe was actually one of the first people to stop by whenever we were there. We had like black turf that wasn't really good. We couldn't work out during the day because there was a staffing agency on one side and a dentistry office on the other. So it really wasn't the most ideal location or start, but it's all we could afford. But the whole goal was we always wanted to just continue to grow, and we wanted to have our training speak first, not everything we had inside. So we were very fortunate that we had a bunch of athletes come on board and train with us, and then we added an adult side, and the adult side basically paid for the bills, just to be very transparent. My wife did those, the adult trainings, and we did like a boot camp class. We did a modified CrossFit class. We actually got in trouble with CrossFit because we were calling it X-Fit. So we got hit with all that, but then so we grew to about 70 people, and those are both adults and athletes in the first like 5 or 6 months. So the tipping point there, and this is a funny story that I'll always tell, is we had a bigger lady that was working out with us, and we had one of those refrigerators that had RTD drinks in it, and she was doing a bodyweight squat, and every time she would squat, her butt would hit the refrigerator. So I looked at my wife and I said, I think it's time to move. So we had to move. We moved to a larger location, which was in an awful spot logistically, and we were only really centered to Davie County, which is where we're at. So it was one high school town. We only could train those people because we were basically putting ourselves out in the country. We went from there, and the dream had always been, so whenever we were back in that 1,825 square foot space, the drawings of where we are now started. So we met with an architect, and we just kind of started with a base plan. It was 40,000 square feet. It was a 5,000 square foot weight room. It was a like 10,000 square foot turf area, and then the rest was basketball courts and like bathrooms. And right adjacent to us is Fusion Sports, which is like a 6,000 athlete it used to be mostly soccer, but now there's field hockey and they're doing flag football and there's lacrosse. And so we actually, they were in a conjunction of trying to buy 26 acres of land from the county to basically expand fields. Well, on the back side of that was a humongous, like 2,500 housing development. And so whenever they went to approve it, there was like 500 of these people that showed up from that housing development and said, we don't want speakers, we don't want lights. So the town didn't approve it. So then the soccer organization or sports club came to us and said, we'll sell you the land at cost if you want to buy it. If not, we're going to lose like $50,000 in due diligence money. So at that point, we did not have a investor. We obviously didn't make enough money to pull up a $14 million thing from a bank. So then we hurried really fast, and we went and met probably 4 or 5 people that are around that I know are worth, I don't know, in the hundreds of millions of dollars. One of the guys, actually, funny story, there's a piece on the defibrillators that are in ambulances that connect to where the airflow goes in. The company was actually created in the town where we live, and so he created that. So he sold that company for like $99 million. So he was one of those guys, and he was, everybody said it'll never take off because sports aren't that big. None of them had a sports mind. So they just said, there's youth sports are never going to grow to be able to facilitate that. Well, we met with our current partner, and he is a drilling, blasting, and grading service. So somebody comes in, there's rock under the ground, he'll blast it, he'll drill it, blast it, and then he'll haul it off. So he's not even in the sports world either. He played golf, was really good at golf, but he didn't know anything really about football and training and basketball. And we pitched it to him one Saturday in December, and he was like, I love it. Let's talk some more about it. So then it went from a 40,000 square foot facility to, we need to make this more about a financial dollar on top of the training. So then it went to 8 basketball courts, 2 indoor turf fields, and then like my 8,000 square foot weight room, concession stands. We now have a partnership with a rehabilitation center. It's Wake Forest Baptist Health. So it turned into something that I don't think anybody, even myself included, could have ever thought. And we started construction in 2018, and then ran into a bunch of bubbles and stops and things where we never thought it was going to get done, just because there are a lot of things that happened that we had no control over. But it came through about 1.5 years ago. All the funding was there, all of the signed paperwork there, the county had written off on it, we were good to go. So I would say December of last year it got real, whenever they basically came to all of us and said, we need to start getting a itemized list together of things we want. So then I was able to go and start making a Christmas list of a weight equipment that I wanted. And to be very transparent, guys, like, so this is my idea, but we brought somebody else on board because I really and truthfully didn't care about the basketball courts or how the day-to-day interaction from spectators was going to be. I just wanted more of the weight room, the turf, and then the overall performance side to be top notch. So that's where we are.
So just so you guys know, and I've learned a lot since being with Dynamic on how long a process it is to get these projects run, not only from scratch, because the truth is, Adam told you they broke ground in 2018. I first heard about this project, I think 4 years even before that. I mean, this has been an ongoing, interesting process to watch as a third-party watcher until we got involved directly with Dynamic, of how long it takes, and then watching other universities and how the educational side of it is, and how long it takes some of these projects from beginning to end. It's a long process, something that I didn't really understand, because when I did 2 rooms, it went very, very fast. And maybe because one was an NFL organization, so it wasn't about fundraising or finding a budget. and the other one was at a major university who the fundraising was already done. So it's very interesting that for all of you who are starting the planning phase, unless the funding is available right away, it's a longer process, and the due diligence that needs to be done with the paperwork takes a tremendous amount of time.
So I actually, while he was talking, I went back and looked at my email. The very first architectural email drawing that we had was 8/31/2016, and then we actually broke ground. We had a project kickoff meeting August 30th of 2017. So right there, you're looking at a full year of just planning of the structure. So I mean, it's a very, very crazy process that I never thought could have ever happened.
So my next question would be for those of us that would be able to start from scratch like you did, and again, we're not talking about 120,000 square foot building, but specifically for your 8,000 square foot performance area, which most people would consider the weight room.
Yep.
What do you think, like from the ground up, if you're at a high school, if you were at a, and we've put some high schools in that are just ridiculous.
Yes, look good.
But if you were building a building from the ground up, what would be an ideal recommendation for a high school coach that has going to the booster club, asking for funding, the administration's approved it, school districts approved it,
Yep.
and you're building out? What do you think would be an ideal square footage to ask for, where you're not going to get head shaking and it's very realistic to get accomplished?
The first thing that, and so where we're essentially located, and it's like Joe said, we're basically right in the middle of North Carolina. I know, John, you're down in Charlotte, so it's a little bit more southern, but from where I'm sitting, I can get to Raleigh, what, 2 hours?
2 hours.
Raleigh in 2 hours, Charlotte in an hour, East Carolina, which is about 3.5. So like realistically where we're at. So the dynamic of high schools around us in Winston are like, there's a couple 1A, 2A, 3A, 4A. So the question is kind of really crazy from a standpoint of every school is going to have a different size. But where I would start first and foremost would be, there's a few high schools, and I'm not going to speak about names, but there's a few high schools around here that are 4A that their weight room is smaller than an average classroom. So the classroom obviously is holding 30 students with desks, and then a teacher's desk, and then whatever on the walls. So there's a few weight rooms around here that are 4A schools, brand new schools, that legitimately are smaller than an average high school classroom. And you're going to be asking a 4A program, which is going to have anywhere from 70 to 100 kids, JV and varsity, to run an off-season summer program, adequately supplying A, enough equipment, B, enough space, and then C, realistically, is there an adequate strength coach on staff that can house 70 kids, maybe 2 different sessions a day on 6 racks, 6 bars, and 6 benches? So my thing where I would always go first is I would start from the bottom. And what I mean by the bottom is I would say, what's going to be our biggest number of athletes we have in here at one point? And then you facilitate, how many are we going to put per rack, 3 or 4? Is it a high level high school? You're going to have a lot of freshmen coming in. And so I think it just depends on the dynamic of where you're going. And then, obviously the space that plays a humongous role. And that's kind of, I know he didn't ask this question, but going to where we, and I'm probably going to answer something before, so I apologize.
That's all right.
Going to where we wanted to be was, I wanted to be able to have enough room to grow. So if I wanted to put more pieces of equipment in, then I have the space to do it. But I wanted to make sure that I would have to be really killing it, which I'm not going to say that we're not going to get there, because since we've been here, it's been exploding from the number standpoint. But I wanted to make sure that when we opened the doors, there was 2 or 3 years worth of leeway that I don't have to worry about. So the racks we put in, I could have enough people to come in and say, so it really and truthfully for me, whenever we were building our facility, I went with not equipment first. I went with square footage, and the square footage was a humongous rectangle box, and attached to our square footage was a locker room that only is accessible to our athletes and clients, so that I know that inside of that box I can train an upwards of how many kids. And I think that transfers down to a high school, or even a private setting. It goes to what is the maximum number of kids you can have in one space, but then is your program built off Olympic lifts? Is your program built off just power lifts? So are you going to be cleaning? Do you need the floor space to clean? So that's kind of where we went with it.
So here's a question I used to know this answer, maybe John or Carlo or someone else on the call can answer this for us. The question from Eric was, is there some type of formula? And there was one, like how many athletes you're going to have in at a time and times that by a specific square footage. And that can give you an approximation of what type of size weight room you should recommend to your administration. Is there anybody who knows that formula?
It's 100 square feet per athlete. Minimum recommended amount of space is 100 square feet per athlete.
So you go, if you got 100, if you're going to have 100 football players in there, you times that by 100 square feet and 10,000 square feet, right?
So these 1,200 square foot classrooms don't make it really count.
So those storage rooms they're converting aren't helping us. Is that, Eric, that help you out? Yes, great. Good. I'm glad I thought it was 100. I didn't want to speak out of turn. So then that comes to this question then, Adam, because you said at your first vision of this, you had 5,000, which we've talked a lot. 5,000 square foot in a private sector is a pretty solid facility for weight room only. Some programs are opening up, and I think, again, depending on what your budget is, I know to me 5,000 with a little bit of turf in the weight room is a really good startup square footage. Where did the 8 come from? Just based off of the tremendous size of the building once you saw the scope?
No. The 8,000, and this is going to be, I'm not a vain person, so don't think that I'm confident or cocky or any way, but the 8,000 square foot came from, I wanted somebody of Coach Ken or obviously you guys or someone who has no clue what a weight room should look like to walk in and be like, this is how it's supposed to be done. I didn't want to have, racks stacked on top of each other. I didn't want it to be no free space. And so I knew that what I wanted, and essentially, guys, I'm going to be very transparent. I wanted to have a private sector field of a Division I program. And, obviously there's not every piece of equipment in there that I want just yet. But as Coach was talking today after his workout, we were looking at another area and thinking how can we utilize that space as well to, basically in the next few months grow into that. And there's, even with this humongous build that we just did with Dynamic, it was things that we've already left out. And I'm just like, shit, how do we leave that out? Who's connecting?
Yeah. The real boss just connected in. So we've got to be very, very on point. Yeah. Well, that brings up to one of the questions that we did have earlier. And the question had to relate towards what I would call accessory pieces or machines. And the question was, in a facility, do you want a lot of different machines and maybe a couple of each, or a few machines and a lot of them? I'll answer first. And I've been at major college, I've been at moderate size colleges, and I've been at the NFL level. A lot of it, one, is going to really relate to how you program yourself and what you think's in the best interest of your athletes. So from that standpoint, there are certain pieces that I do recommend. I think you need a quality plate loaded seated row. I think you need a quality lat pull down. I think if you have this space to even add a selectorized traditional lat pull down versus a low row combo. I think in this day and age, with the amount of athletes coming in, that I would recommend a prone row or what people call a seal row bench. And the big reason for that is, as I am a proponent of free weight movements, I'm also a proponent of protecting and safety. And when you're dealing with college athletes, pro athletes, high school athletes who are not professional lifters or not high quality lifters where lifting is their sport, you want a prone row bench to do what most people would consider barbell bent over rowing. Because most kids starting out, one, are not strong enough in the posterior chain to maintain a proper position. And two, it's from a safety standpoint, really, I want them working their upper back. I'll do RDLs and some other movements to do the posterior chain work. So it really takes some of the pressure off the athlete when you're teaching them, and they can focus on what we really want to develop. Those would be my big upper body choices. And with that, depending on the size, you want at least, again, a lot of it, even in Adam's room, there's some choices we made and we went back and forth, but I would, in an 8 platform facility, I would love to have 4 of those pieces each. That would be ideal. And for every 8 platforms you'd have on those types of main pieces, I would prefer to have 4. All the other pieces, like a leg press and leg curl, leg extension, those are going to be very, very unique types of usages in my programming, but I want them in my weight room. So I would probably hope to have 1. Then there's others that are, I consider medical, like a reverse hyper. In a powerlifting or a weightlifting facility, I probably want more, but in a facility where I'm using that pretty much from a medical standpoint or rehabilitation or kids that need improvement areas in low back and posterior chain work, I don't need as many as I used to think we needed. I think a lot of times right now, a lot of people are going over abundance on certain pieces, and they're not getting the amount of work and the amount of usage out of them because they're just copying other programs. So you got to know what you want. That's the one thing I'll tell anybody design. Don't look at the school down the street and because they have this, you got to match it or have more. Because my question would be, are you actually going to use the pieces that you're buying? That's what you have to look at first. If you buy a piece, why do you buy it? Why do I want a leg press and I only need 1? Because that's specifically medical, 100%. So those are the things that you have to ask for. So in my world, I would tell you it's a combination of both. For very, very specific pieces, I would want more of the same. And then depending on square footage, I'd want as many ancillary pieces as I could get, if that makes sense. I hope that helps answer that question. Adam, what do you think?
It just, so for us, so the way that we program is, I don't know, it's not really like we don't stick to a certain guideline. And the reason why is, and I mean, what I found is when we started out in the private sector, you try to follow the same guidelines as what a college would or a major program would. And for the most part of how you program your workouts and how you build your blocks, that's fine. But Johnny comes in and Johnny's a 5th grader and is as unathletic as my water bottle. Or John comes in and he's a 6th grader who is a superior athlete. So how do you adjust? Because little Johnny's going to have to be taking baby steps, more of like a block 0 method, or you're going to have John who needs it, but he can be propelled a little bit faster. So for us, it was, we could have went with a bunch of different machines, which whenever I was first, when I was first told to build my dream weight room, I mean, I had everything, like things that we probably now hindsight's 2020, we never would have used because nobody had ever came to me and said, hey, you have a $500,000 budget for a weight room. And it's like, okay, well, I'll just start throwing shit together. Sorry, I'm not allowed to say that on here. I'll start throwing stuff together. So I started throwing stuff together and, and then sitting down, meeting and having discussions with how are we going to play this weight room out is whenever I started to finally fine tune down what exactly we wanted and how we programmed. And we come to find out how much was that? Almost $100,000 over stuff that I was not going to want. Yeah. So we were like we broke down the final thing and basically because of the way that I was like given a Christmas tree list or a Christmas list, I'd taken $100,000 off, and it's, to be honest with you, it's more than we could ever need to start. So we're happy with it. So it just depends on, we just stick with the basics. So we got some lat pull downs. We have the January version.
Yeah, they have They went alternate racks, so we have
Yeah.
4 jammer attachments,
Yep.
all adjustable training arm attachments, which also can be used as another half rack.
Yep.
They have single arm pulley cables. We have 4 glued hams, 2 inverse leg curls, 3 of our plate loaded lat pull downs, 2 full sets of dumbbells to 125, 4 sets of plyo boxes.
Tons
And then,
of,
and then
kettlebell.
again, because this is a private sector and it's heavily influenced by the adult section, Adam did a really good job when we talked about the lineage. He knew exactly how this was going to line up, him and Jessica's vision, because they have such a popular adult fitness crowd and they didn't want to intimidate that group, so to speak, with the inclusion of all this education or athletic type of equipment. So they have 2 lines of racks where on their adult fitness side, they have traditional squat stands with benches. And then we have, we created a row of dumbbells and kettlebells and med ball line storage that kind of gives a little bit of a separation of the room. And then on the other side, you have 4 traditional athletic based multi-purpose stations. And then on the back row up against the fence that leads to the turf is this posterior chain line. So it's it's got really good lines, a lot of space in between. So it's very, very safe and effective. Athletes and adults can intertwine and not be in anybody's safe zone, which brings me up to this, because this was something that is a big question to me all the time. I go back and forth myself. I know where I lean, but Adam is one of the few, one of the few facilities in this era that chose above ground platforms in his facility. In this age of inlaid platforms, Adam chose above ground. I will tell you specifically a little bit about why I think above ground has a lot of merit still to this day. But Adam, from a functional standpoint, oh, I hate that word, will tell you why he decided to go with the above ground, and then I'll piggyback from him.
So, and to be very honest, we were going to go with the inlay because we were, of course you look at all the new fancy stuff and you see everything laid in flush and perfect, and there's a lot of facilities that are turning away from the platform look, and I'll be very transparent. We were in the beginning, that's what I wanted. But then you start thinking about it, talking to people like Joe and then Craig, and not even people with dynamic, but just people that have been in the game for a long time. So Thunder down at NC State, talking to those guys, Mike Joseph at West Virginia, they just give you insight of how they do their facility. And obviously it's drastically different just because they are from the Division I high level tuning athletes. And like I told you a few minutes ago, when somebody walks in our facility, whether it be a professional athlete, whether it be a D1 athlete, or whether it be an average Joe high school kid, we want them to feel like they're in one of the best facilities in the country from a private standpoint. So the reason we went with the platform is when I started doing the process of building this, I, in my mind, wanted to be able to have 3 to 4 kids at every station. And the reason why is I'm also the performance director for that club that I said is right adjacent to us. So in about 2 months from yesterday, I will have 166 of their top level soccer players. They're going to be coming in here. And so I knew that, okay, if you take in their, 4 sessions a night, including in our sessions and including in adult sessions, I knew that I needed to get enough space that could adequately supply and have enough square footage to be able to safely be able to put everybody through it. So actually the day we were installing, we were 3 feet, right? We were at 3 feet in between each platform, and then we pushed it to 4 because we had enough square footage. And literally the pushing it to 4 was a perfect fit because you didn't go too wide. There's still walkways for parents. There's still walkways to get to the office space. And then we went 12 foot off of the fence, which then we were able to create another line of the posterior chains behind the platform. So they were kind of out of the way. So the biggest thing for us was functionality, and I wanted that platform, as simple as I could put it, to be that station. So that above ground platform in my mind would create a station for those athletes to say, hey, listen, you guys are at rack 1 today, you're not going anywhere else. And not saying that the Inlaid wouldn't, but in my mind, the Inlaid looks really flush and really sweet. But it's like a younger kid who is 16 may not understand. You're saying it's your platform because there's technically not a platform there. It's a piece of rubber that just has your logo on it and it looks fancy. And I'll be honest with you, any of you guys that ever want to come here, and you're more than welcome to come work out in here. The above ground platform is a sick look. And it is a little old school look, but if you do it properly and it's done the right way, you just can't beat an above ground look.
Yeah. So what I would say is, here's the take for the. I'll give you a little bit of what I think the history of the Inlaid and how the Inlaid became popular, and then I'll give you my take on why I think you should very much consider, if it's capable, an above ground platform. I believe Inlaid became popular because more and more strength coaches or professionals, especially at the college university setting, were doing more movement type and paired exercise movement with a strength movement and a lot of complex work in their facility, and the above ground platform took away from usable space if everything was in line. And then that became a new wave of adding more square footage, usable square footage for more independent action. Like, I know that there was schools that would prop their benches up and be able to use that entire row of platforms as an area for them to do a general movement prep warm up, high knee skips, basic jumps, and all the ancillary stuff. Well, now what's growing is most of these major universities who are building new facilities are building them in connection with field houses and indoor turf fields. Yep. So that you don't need that. You don't need that anymore, so to speak. I don't think that the Inlaid is as important, when in Adam's case, he literally walks through his gate. There's about a 6 feet separation of a walkway, a cement walkway slab, and he's on 26,000 square foot of field turf. So I think that if you are in a facility that you're going to be comboed out, where the indoor facility and the field turf or the artificial turf is laid right next to you, and you have an open-ended weight room that walks right out, is there really a need for Inlaid platforms? Also, what I'll say is, here's the real kicker: safety. Yep. In large group settings, to me, there is a big safety issue with Inlaid platforms. We're talking facility design. And I'm not here to steer you one way or the other. I'm just here to stimulate your thought. Because, like, here's the difference. Inlaid platforms, there's no separation of where the work is being done and the individuals around the platform. I've seen time and time again on social media, on max effort sessions, a kid's cleaning 300 pounds and there's kids cheering them standing in the workstation. It's only going to take one guy dumping a weight on an athlete's foot to make big issues. And then the best thing that happened to us is, because we could move our platforms at Torque by pushing to 3 to 4, even in an above ground, you still are giving a wider space and separating the safety zones from one platform to another. The fact that you have to stand up on a several-inch elevated platform tells all the people who are observing you lift to stay off the work area. It's very hard to do when you have Inlaid platforms and multiple people working at the same time. So if you have the capabilities to go above ground versus Inlaid, you need to really, really consider that. And again, I'm one person's opinion. We did that in particular at the Panthers, go above ground, because we couldn't have 4 feet in between our platforms. We were very, very tight, 2 feet, which that's a tough one for me. I prefer 3 feet or greater, but our room was designed a certain way where we could only go a few feet. So it was much tighter. So we had to show a separation of the work zone and the safe zone for the athlete performing the lift. and those who are ancillary walking through a 2 foot area versus a 4 foot where Adam has. So when you're looking at it from a standpoint of safety and effectiveness, be aware of that, that you're really going to have to do a good job as a coach and a practitioner of watching the safe zone when there's large groups cheering on their teammates or teaming on other people in the gym when they're performing max effort or a very important set on a platform type of load. The other point that Adam didn't bring up is, remember, he wants to be able to add pieces to his facility.
Yep.
You add inlaid platforms, you're not being able to move anything around. You are setting that room in stone. Because if you move a platform off the inlaid, now you've changed the whole dynamic of the game and the space changes. So there's and people who work for me know I love moving stuff around. So it was very, very adamant that being in my world, that's why to me, I'll probably always side on above ground platforms because I know I'll get antsy and want to make some subtle moves. And Adam now, again, because we're 4 feet, we still can be, and I say we because I like being here and he likes me, he lets me come. So I think if it had to, he could move down to 3 feet and still be in a very safe and effective move if he needed square feet additional for pieces that he's going to add on in the future. So that's my kind of little tangent on the above ground stuff as far as it, and it's specifically based off safe zones. 100%. And to be honest with you, when you look, we're fortunate here that we have a upper deck that you can look down. It does bring some, what's the right word? Personality to the room, having an above ground platform. So I think that's something to be said too, because in this day, aesthetically pleasing rooms are very, very important, especially for those who are recruiting athletes. High level of importance.
And I'm going to add, because I think we both forgot about it. When we were actually on day one of the install, the installers were asking how far we wanted off. But one of the biggest things is, obviously, Joe and I are not small individuals, but we were walking in between 2 platforms while they were imitating, somebody using a jammer arm or somebody using a squat. And we wanted to be able to say if somebody was going off a jammer arm or somebody was going off a squat to a posterior, could they comfortably and safely maneuver in between a platform and not get anybody's way? And so that's essentially why we went with 4 feet, is they could come right off of it and not really and truthfully ever be in harm's way, because that platform gives you that, I'm not going to walk to the bar, I'm not going to walk under the bar. It gives you a zone where you can't get there.
And that also goes into one of the things that I've said with the 2 foot spacing on the inlaid. And I think some of you guys who've been in these bigger facilities will see what I'm talking about, is if you got 2 guys spotting or 2 athletes squatting at the same time and you need spotters, well, if you only have 2 feet in between and you're doing 3-person spot, those side spotters are going to hit each other. There's not enough room in between those platforms for 2 people to be squatting big weights at the same time with 2 people spotting on both end caps. So there's a lot of things to think about that sometimes we're not thinking. A lot of times coaches are like, I want 40 platforms in this 2,000 square foot room, get it done. And again, it's got to be thought about athlete out first, safety and effectiveness first. And sometimes that might mean a 20 platform room is now 16. These are choices and these are things that have to be discussed with the staff, and those of you who are funding the project also. So talking about fundraising, and again, Adam was fortunate he found a major partner who had the necessary funding to do that. A lot of times at high schools, that's not necessarily the case. And I think there's a couple of high school guys on that could help us. The biggest thing that I've noticed with public schools and I just had a meeting with the public school district here in Forsyth County, is they have no money. Yep. There's no money to be invested into certain projects. So I think my first and foremost is, and this comes to one of the questions about building community sport, fundraising, convincing administration of the need. I think if you go with the right presentation and talk about health, wellness, and the protection of an athlete with the proper programming and the proper size facility, administration will agree with all of it. And then they're going to come back and tell you, we have no money. And I'm talking more the public school setting. Private school setting is a little bit different.
Yeah.
And I can't necessarily speak for that. But in the public school setting, this is where you're going to have to rely on building community support. How well are you going to do that? Well, as the strength coaches, how well are you committed to the athletes, and how well have you built a relationship with the athletes' parents? Because the parents then, what do they drive? They drive booster clubs. And booster clubs do the majority of the fundraising for a lot of schools. And that's the attack point. You have to build, if you can, first, you build your presentation, you show a needs analysis, you show an assessment, you show why this can be a benefit to not just the athletes, but the entire physical education and general pop of the school. Then once the administrations understand, yes, you're correct, but funding's an issue, now you work outwards, right? What kind of relationships do you have with the parents? Which one, I hope you have one with the booster club president.
Yeah.
I mean, that's going to be critical. I mean, Adam's worked with Davie High. He's worked with a couple of the high schools here, West Forsyth. So he understands that from that direction, because I'm sure the money that's being brought in for him to work with some of the teams is coming from the booster club, not necessarily directly from school funds. So that's the key to me, is your presentation to administration. They understand there's a need, and then for you to be, I don't want to say a salesman, but for you to show that you're a service to these people's sons and daughters, create that support, and then the booster clubs and the lead generators of the booster clubs can help you with different types of fundraising solutions. One of the easiest ones for a weight coach is a lift-a-thon to start off.
Yep.
Just doing some basic donations. Hey, we're going to do a bench press clean test. We're going to open it up to the public. We'll do it in the gym, and we're going to go out and solicit $1 a pound or 10, whatever you are willing to give, penny a pound, 10 cents a pound. That's one way to start. And then you'll see if you have value. You'll see what the community support is by how many people show up to support. Then it's going to different vendors or different businesses in the area, figuring out ways to support. Like, I'm not super sure here, Adam can confirm this, but here, like at Fusion, I think each field is sponsored by a company. Like, instead of going to field 12, we're going to play at the Subway field. Instead of going to field 6, we're going to Jimmy John's. And to me, that's a lot easier to find than field 6, because that Subway logo is a better standout than a number. I saw a cool thing at a school we were at recently with Carlo, where I spoke, where they were actually selling sponsorships and advertising on each platform. Remember back in the day when I came up, football teams would have their little guides for the game. And then in the back, you'd sell little quarter page, half page, full page ads. Well, very similar in this weight room, above each rack, they had some type, whether it was me promoting my son, like, hey, good luck this year, Joe, number 7. And you paid a certain price to raise money that way, which I thought was super cool, because we thought about that when we were at Arizona State, is we should say if guys want to sponsor each platform. So that's another cool way in a weight room to hopefully find ways to fundraise.
Adam, I got a question for you, Adam. I noticed that you were labeling courts. How does the sponsorship like that work? Is that by the total number of athletes that come through the facility? How does a company identify the value to them when you ask for a sponsorship like that?
Yeah, so I'll be very transparent. This thing got to the point where it was too big, and we hired somebody to do that. But I can speak on that. So with what we actually have in this facility is we're the largest indoor facility in North Carolina, and we have NCAA regulation courts. They're NBA 3-point, all this kind of stuff. But what we were able to do is, like, for example, right now, and I don't know if you guys can hear him, but we have a 16-team volleyball organization that practices out of our facility. We have a 24-team basketball organization that practices out of our facility. So then we went, and this is no joke. Before I called any weightlifting company, any kind of performance company, I called the biggest basketball providers in the entire country whenever we started this process. There hadn't even been a shovel in the ground. Phenom Hoops, Big Shots, those are held all the way across the country. And we actually, so I presented to them what we have. So then now not only do we have people practicing here, but we've only been open for 4 weeks. And our first week we did 76 basketball teams. Second week it was like 15. It was nothing big. Third week it was 151. Last week it was 120. This week is nothing, but then we're going to have a showcase event for North Carolina in 2 weeks that'll bring in 200 college coaches across the country. So, Carlo, to answer your question, man, our biggest thing was we built the clientele list first, and then we took that clientele list and said, hey, listen, we're estimating on our basketball courts alone 1.1 million visitors this year. So we're going to give you the option. Do you want to spend X amount of dollars to sponsor the whole court? Do you want to spend X amount of dollars to sponsor the court, just buy like a ribbon? And what I mean by a ribbon is our scoreboard has a ribbon that goes around it, as far as like it's a electronic band that just kind of scoops around. Mm-hmm. So we're doing those for a lot cheaper. I think those are like maybe $2,000 for a year. And the only thing, it's just a scroll that just rolls the whole time. And then, obviously in the years to come, I want to try to attack, not me personally, but I think we should go after somebody to sponsor every single court. Whether it be a basketball organization that has the funding or the professional name behind it to make it their home, or, I kind of add on to what Joe's speaking about the soccer fields. So the complex right adjacent to us, I believe, is 17 soccer fields, 4 of which are completely turf. I mean, I'm talking about like 176,000 square feet of turf is all it is. And then they have one stadium field that's just a plain grass field. So they went, and there's a big car dealership around the area that's like one of those that has a name, but they have like Flo Honda, Flo Chevrolet, Flo Ford. They have like every single name. They sponsored all 4 fields up top for a 10-year fee. Now, I don't know what that fee was. I'm going to guess it was in the millions of dollars. And then Wake Forest Baptist Health sponsored their stadium, and they did a 10-year sponsorship for that. So I'm just, the biggest thing for me, and the reason that Fusion was able to get those people to bite, and everybody here has probably at some point had to deal with a sponsorship, trying to find something for a camp, a weight room, or however it may be. I took Fusion's model and our model in the beginning, and it was like, we got to put bodies in the seats first. So our sponsorship packages right now are trickling in because people are like, oh, we didn't even know if you guys were going to survive, let alone, show up with already almost 500 teams under our belt that have competed here. And that's no volleyball. We have a 200-some team volleyball event that's going to be going, I believe, in December, which will bring in tons and tons of people. So now we can go against and say, hey, can we get volleyball sponsors? Can we get this? So, the biggest thing for us was I tried to make it as simple as possible. I didn't want to go out there and, hey, let me go for Nike or Adidas. We went small first. Mm-hmm. We went with a bunch of local companies that are, I'm not going to say they're, multi-million-dollar companies, but they're companies that have a lot of business in this area, to where if somebody coming in from Greensboro sees that, it's not going to matter if Mom and Pop's Tire Shop is a $10,000 sponsor on a court, because nobody's going to come. But there's an apparel company that started up. They did one because they're trying to get really nationally known from a big standpoint. So, I mean, it just depends on what you're looking for. And now we're trying to get, maybe I can't tell you the name, but we're trying to get the turf fields by a big sponsor. And so, that's like
hotels are next. Hotels are next.
Yeah, that's like $100,000 sponsor on the on the turf fields because they wanted to have the naming rights. And then obviously the biggest one is naming rights of the building.
Mhm.
So, it'll be Rise Indoor Sports at blank, 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 or blank, blank, blank at Rise Indoor Sports. So, it was a great question, but, it's just, I thought in the very beginning it was going to be a lot easier, but it's so much of a dynamic headache, to be honest with you. No pun intended, dynamic.
So here, I have a question, and I think a lot of people would want to know. You came in with a budget,
Mhm.
and then my question is, as you're going through your choices of equipment companies and you're evaluating different styles and different pieces, how much
Yeah.
does cost come into play when you're evaluating the product? Or are you going straight,
My bad.
what's the best product regardless of price, and I'm okay with that? Or because some people, price is going to come in, some people it's not.
Yep.
And I always want to know how much, when you, again, you pretty much were fortunate. I mean, you had the ticket, you had the golden ticket.
I did.
You hit the golden ticket, and
I
we
did.
talked about that. And one of the things that we felt was you were going to be in the good graces of your your man, your
Yeah.
money guy, because you were getting all the product you wanted, and it's coming in under budget.
Yes.
So when you're making these final decisions, or when you talk, how much should cost come into play, or are you looking at product quality regardless?
So, and I may take this off on a little bit more than what he asked, but I think it's vital. And I was actually thinking about this question when we first started. So, whenever we got the basketball guys involved, we got the volleyball guys involved, everything like that. Then it turned to how do I want my weight room to look, and and I wanted in the structural, I guess you would say, layout. I wanted a huge rectangle. I didn't want to have a bunch of lines and crazy things. It wanted to be clean, sharp, nothing crazy. Um, and so the biggest thing that I did is, and I'll never forget this. So after I work out, I go on like an hour walk. And after every workout for a solid week, I called companies. I called Sorinex, I called Rogue, I called Hammer, I called Power. And it's talking to those guys, and all of a sudden they think you're small potatoes because it's a private guy. Obviously most private guys don't come in there with a $500,000 budget. And so to be very transparent, I said, here's what I'm looking for. Oh, and Rogers, apologize. So I went in and I was going to all these companies, and literally it got overwhelming because it was, and everybody's a salesman, everybody gets the pitch, everybody's got to do all their things, and I completely understand that aspect. So there was never a part of that lean me one way or the other, because I'm not that kind of person. Like, no, I'm not going to be lean from a sales pitch. To be very transparent, I would say that Sorinex by the Glitz and Glam was my top choice. Whenever everything started, you get sucked into the aura of what I think in my mind strength and conditioning is gotten to with more of a celebrity status. And it was 16 power racks, and it was all this stuff where it was like they said, well, how much is your budget? And I was like, there really isn't one. And that's probably what I shouldn't have told them, because then it was 16 power racks, 25,000 pounds worth of competition style bumpers and 100 bars and all this stuff. And I mean, and I showed Joe the breakdown of everything, and it was like I was going into literally a 25,000 square foot D1 weight room that Alabama was constructing. And it was going to be something that you could house 70 to 100 kids and have no problem. But it wasn't built for me. It was built for my head that I thought I wanted. So, the number one thing that we decided to go with Dynamic for was the quality of equipment, the quality of the friendship / relationship / I guess if you want to call it a sales point that was presented to us. And this isn't a pitch for Dynamic. That's not the kind of person I am, but I'm just speaking the truth here, that what was presented to us I never even knew dynamic existed until I really and truthfully got talking to Joe. I think one guy reached out to me before, and I was like, dynamic, I've never heard of that. And then, Joe got me on board. And Craig came on board, and I knew Craig from before. And so, you start talking to these guys who have been in the game, who have lived it, they've breathed it from every level. And you start seeing like, hey man, this equipment's actually really nice stuff. And then we started dialing in, like what kind of going back to what we were talking about before, about how did I want my room to look? And then we're going, wait a second, why do I need 16 power racks, double-sided power racks at that? So why do I need 32 people being able to squat at one time when I'm a private facility? And that was just the athlete side. Then you're looking at a 20-person, cage for the adults. Guys, I'm telling you, whenever this first thing got constructed, I could probably house 100 people at one time in that facility. And that would have been way too much. I never would have been able to feel that. And every time there was a group in there, it would have looked like we weren't training anybody because the space wasn't good enough. So, for me personally, it came down to relationships. It came down to, do I know that I'm being taken care of, because this is a humongous event for me. I don't plan to ever move this facility. I'm not going to say that I'm done, because I'm not done, but this is where this is going to stay. This is the home base. And I wanted the home base to look sharp. I wanted the home base to be functional first. So functionality was the most important thing for me. Look sharp, look clean, have that feel when people walk in. Is it a style that we can compete with anybody else from a private sector? Yes. But at the end of the day, it was about relationships, connections, and how were we treated, meaning we, my wife and myself, to not make it seem like it was a money grab just to basically sell something else. Is that how you want me to answer it? Is that good? I mean, I'm just
It's
speaking.
your
here.
show, man. I'm just,
Yeah.
hey, we speak the truth around here. So
Yeah, I mean, that's just,
I just asked a question, and however you want to answer it.
yeah.
Believe me, there's a lot of people who've heard me speak for the last 20 years know that I'll go off on things that don't make no sense half the time too. So
Well, and that's just where I guess that's why he and I can chit chat, because who knows where it's going to end up. But no, so for me it was started off as a dream, and it's like how many Cadillacs can I get in one buy? But then it got down to, I need something that's going to last me for a long time. I need something that's going to be able to build a relationship. I'm not looking at somebody's paycheck from a day-to-day operational standpoint. And we went with dynamic because it just seemed like a better fit for what we wanted. And I wasn't going after the glitz and glam lifestyle. I was going after, how do I get as many athletes in here as possible that I can make a difference in their life. And that's the equipment we went with.
Coach, I got a million questions for you, right? Because as a private facility, I've seen that facility, and I've kind of worked in the private sector, and I've done the whole boot camp and the private training. And
Yep.
How is that improved for you, right? Like, now that you have improvement for two sides.
Yep.
You go out there now to all the local high schools, knowing, and I've done my research in North Carolina, right, where there's no budgets to have your own weight room, your own strength coach. As part of your business model now to connect with local high schools and provide them the strength and conditioning for the teams?
Okay, good. Give me answer that one first, Carlo.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll start with that one.
Okay, so realistically, and while Joe was talking about that earlier, so there's some things that are being worked on right now for the local area, and he kind of touched on it. But for the most part, and I know obviously John is in Charlotte. Carlo, I think you're Ohio?
Cleveland.
Ohio, yeah.
So North Carolina, from a strength conditioning standpoint on the high school level, is very far behind. And most of the time you're looking at a high school coach who is just maybe a PE teacher, and they don't have to be a PE teacher. They're the ones running the classes in the weight room. And at 9 times out of 10, that's just pulling something off of a slideshow they maybe went to a coaching clinic and saw. So there's no application that's being shown to it. So you're getting a kid, and there was one high school, and I'm not going to say it's nowhere around here, but they were doing box squats. But in the video, you hear the coach yelling, "Bounce off the boxes." And so you're just shaking.
That's the way to do them, John.
Yeah,
that's the way to do them.
You're just sitting there shaking your head going, "Oh my gosh." But anyway, so there's one strength coach around here that, and I'll be very honest with you, Carlo, we don't see any of his athletes. And that makes me, and from a standpoint of, So from a standpoint of
You know what that is, Carlo.
money, that's bad for me because I'm losing access to one whole high school. But then again, from the strength and conditioning mindset, I am like, I spoke to him the other night on the phone, and it was like, dude, I commend you highly. And it's Reagan High School, Coach Carey out there, Carey Harbor, who is former strength and conditioning coach on the collegiate level, played collegiate football. I think he played A&T, right? North Carolina Central. And he and actually Kevin from Dynamic were teammates for a little bit. But, so his football team and his football guys are well trained. A lot of those guys don't get hurt. A lot of those guys get postseason honors, and a lot of those guys get to go play collegiately. Now, I'm not saying their strength and conditioning program is what gets those kids to play collegiately. They got some great athletes over there. But when you look at, rosters of kids tearing labrums and ACLs and hamstring pulls, and there's, we started with 50 and we're down to 30, Carey doesn't have that. Carey's got a great program over there. But no, so I've helped Davey, and, West Forsyth reached out this year, and, they're just looking at, and don't get me wrong, like this facility invites a lot of people.
And Adam's a Davey grad.
Yep.
And his brother was a big timer at Davey, went to West Virginia, and actually was with training camp with me a few years back with the Panthers.
Yeah. So it's, and I've talked to Joe, I've talked to Carey, I've talked to Kevin and Craig all through Dynamic. And I mean, I would love to see some kind of movement done. And there's some guys in the North Carolina, or my apologies, the National High School Strength and Conditioning Association. They're doing a really good job, and the states located all around us, South Carolina, Georgia, they're killing it.
They're strong.
They're killing it on the strength and conditioning sector for high school. And we're just so far behind, and I'm going to say this, and this is the kind of person I am, so I'm sure this is not going to go over well with some high school coaches. Man, there's some coaches here that don't want to get help because it makes them look like they're weaker.
That's everywhere.
And it's that beating to the chest, the pride thing. And I've left high school camps because, they bring me in, or they bring my staff in, and they're like, well, we're going to do it this way. And it's like, well, that way is probably not the best. And it's not even from our programming standpoint. It's like doing bouncing box squats. And then, let's do a 75% back squat max, but we're going to lunge it until they can't walk anymore. And it's kind of like, well, if you want a lawsuit for, crippling someone, that's perfectly fine. So, I mean, so I just think that North Carolina is so far behind, Carlo, that I'm doing everything I can. Like I have, for example, there's an offensive line coach coming here this Friday because he wants to get more involved in how can he help his offensive linemen get better in a weight room setting. And I'm doing it for free. He can come out for free. All these coaches can come for free. And now I have the facility to house it because, I want the athletes to become better, and there's no ego on my part. I mean, if they show up, great. If they don't, then it is what it is.
I think, I gave the 2 thumbs down. The issue is not necessarily we're behind in North Carolina because, again, from a school standpoint, we cannot commit to getting people to be full-time strength and conditioning coaches like they have in South Carolina and Georgia and a lot of these public schools. There's some very, very good high school strength coaches that I've met in North Carolina the last several years, and they've done a tremendous job.
Yep.
And the problem isn't that there's not the right coaches, it's the amount of influence that they can have when we are limited by the lack of knowledge and education that our state is not giving to that specific needs. And it's so funny because it's so drastic when you cross the border into South Carolina. I mean, South Carolina had a high school strength and conditioning association started by Coach Schrock, the legend, before probably almost as long as the NSCA. I'm kind of being a little sarcastic, but they had a high school strength and conditioning association before high school strength and conditioning was a legitimate way to find a job. That's how important it was to those guys. They've had strength meets there for years. That's a big part of the strength and conditioning programs in South Carolina is their strength power events. I mean, that's like team bragging rights around there as much as it is winning a state football championship. So it's not, I don't want to give thumbs up we just have to get upper administrations to understand that we've got to commit to certified strength and conditioning coaches in the public school setting. And again, I'm not even going to, I could speak for an hour on my thoughts on being a strength coach in a public school without having a teaching certification, but that's for another day and another hour. Is there any other questions, Carlo? We'll let you have one more, and then we'll wrap it up with another question by you or John or anyone else on the call.
And guys, my wife is actually on here as well, but she just said something. That's what I showed Coach, and her thing is she's probably more of a spitfire than I ever thought about being, and she puts people in their place. But she wanted to comment on that and say people do better when they know better. Education is key. So it's kind of exactly what Coach said. It's like there's people there, but maybe they're not given the opportunity to have the right say-so to do it.
And I will tell you, we have a champion here in North Carolina in Kerry Harbor.
Absolutely.
That guy is a giver. I mean, he is doing as much as he can with the upper echelon of Winston-Salem, Forsyth County School District. And remember, he's doing this all to benefit the kids. He's on all these committees. He's spending all this extra time, and maybe we need more champions.
Well,
and maybe that can move the needle.
Kerry actually sends, this is nuts. This shows you how much Kerry has a heart for the kids. Kerry sends opposing teams their summer program to make sure those kids are prepared better. So I mean, you're looking at a guy who's most high schools are not going to do that. They have a hard time giving a good game film out.
I'd have a hard time doing that.
And Kerry is sending like, hey, there's a coach that is fairly new in the conference, and he asked, what do you do? Obviously, you guys so well. And Kerry just said, I'll zip everything I have to you. And I mean, that's the kind of guy Kerry is. But anyway, Carlo, go ahead. I apologize.
All right, last one for the night, Carlo.
No, I want to open it up.
All right.
I got a million questions. I can call you one-on-one and kind of shoot then. But please, anybody else?
Got anything? Austin, you don't have nothing tonight?
No, not tonight. I had the one about multiple machines or just one, and you guys answered that really well.
All right, well,
Carlo, give us one more.
Yeah, give us one more, Carlo. He's on a roll. We'll let him roll.
So I have more for your wife too. I know she's hiding somewhere back there. I want to know about
on the Zoom call.
Yeah, I know. She's back there.
With our kids.
I want her to answer this one. So training the females, right? I know that you're a private facility. There's a lot of ACL injuries in the female population. Are you seeing any of that from not only the personal training side, but have you seen or heard even from West Baptist, I think it is? Are those filtering into your facility? Are you seeing anything being done to help the female athlete?
So I'll speak first, and then we're gonna unmute her. But I'm going to tell James that he may have to mute her on his own because she may let loose on this. I tell you, she's more of a killer than I am. And I know we talk about the high school level, but if you want to talk about something that's very, very watered down, it's female athletics in North Carolina. And I think we probably go across the entire country for a big part of it. But so that program that I was telling you about that I'm a director for, I have all of their high level boys. Got kids that have gotten Carolina, Princeton, Indiana, which is unbelievable at soccer. And a lot of those guys facilitate into my private sector because I only get to see them one day a week. We're not allowed to even speak to the female sector. Not allowed. We're not allowed to send stuff home. We're not allowed to even go over there and run a small mini session for them. So they're having to come to us. Now, when we moved up here, the exposure to those females have been greater. But since we moved up here, which was 3 weeks ago, maybe, we've been running for 3 weeks. We've had 14 of their higher level girls come in here for training because they do nothing like that. And so then I started asking questions, what is it like? But I mean, so locally to us, there's 3 soccer clubs that are really, really big, and there's nothing. So, one of the biggest things, and obviously, Carlo, you hit the nail on the head, the number one lower body extremity for girls is ACL tears. And so, and I try to, portray that to those organizational leaders, and they don't want to hear it. So, Jessica, you can unmute your mic. But so she basically just said, you know what, screw this. I'm going to go to the top of the top. So she's been emailing and calling everyone at these facilities, these programs, because they've all played collegiate soccer. They're all running collegiate soccer programs, but they still kind of in the same thing. They maybe don't have the education on why is it important if you're going to be presenting yourself where a kid pays $6,000 a year to play soccer. How are we going to get them to understand that it's not just a soccer game, it's a full body component game. So Jessica, you may have to unmute if you want to give any answer. Oh boy, here we go.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah.
I'll keep the video off because I've been at swim practice all afternoon. I think with female sports in general, across the board, everybody knows number one injury in sports is those ACLs. But I think across the board in sports for female, and even I think it trickles down from just adult female fitness stigmas of weight training for females being a negative thing. And so you have this whole education piece of educating parents that, yes, if you have an athlete, whether they're high level, mid-level, low level, whatever it is they are, they need to have some type of strength and conditioning. Their bodies are growing and developing just like a male athlete. And they're not going to put on that much muscle as a male will, just because, the science behind it. But, there's a lot of uphill battle with it. I think you have those like big organizations, how like the NBA just, was out talking about they want equal pay and things like that. I think those are shedding a lot of light in the female side of sports. Mm-hmm. And it helps to trickle down into, those lower level, those organizations like Fusion and stuff like that, where they start to see, okay, hey, maybe this is something that we do need to add on, not just for our boys, but for our girls, and explore it, because, it's only cyclic that they've got new coaches coming in that are more experienced, coaching these girls, but they've been through the ringer, they've been through the strength and conditioning, and they're pushing for it as well. So it's getting back up to the top of those organizations, who are often a lot of times led by people who are clueless. They sit behind a desk and they're just, they're not in the loop, so to speak. So I think for us, I don't think we see as many injuries coming in. I think there's just general ones, but I do know that it goes back up from an adult standpoint, because I have a greater history working with adults that have residual injuries from younger years. I've got bad knees, I've got whatever, I've got bad hips, bad back, and it's a plethora of problems that, you ask, what did you do in your younger years? I played basketball and tennis, and I played 15 sports year round and did nothing to prepare my body except go run sprints. So.
All right. Appreciate that.
All right. With that, I want to thank Adam and Jessica and Torque for having us on site tonight, and to Kurt and Tammy for allowing us to host this event every month, and to James for setting it all up and making sure we're all on point, and for the entire Dynamic staff. Again, we appreciate everybody who reaches out to us. We're here. And remember, I'm 4.2 miles away. I got a new place to train once in a while. And we look forward to people coming through. What is this? Advance, right? Yeah. Advance. It's right on the Advance Clemens border. Adam's here all the time, except Sundays.
Carlo, come through anytime. Austin, I know, John, you're about to move, but obviously you're more welcome to come.
I know we're going to have to figure out where John's headed. Got to go make a visit to John soon. I'll let you leave North Carolina by yourself.
Well, with that being said, again, thanks for everybody attending, and we'll see y'all. Bye.